I never thought much about my childhood until I started telling people about it. "Mark, tell us about yourself," my new college roommates would ask, and I realized just how ordinary, yet uniquely mine, it was. It was like everyone else's but special in ways only I could see. Growing up, I was that curious kid who wanted to understand the world in ways that probably made adults roll their eyes. When my friends wanted to play soccer, I wanted to understand why certain plants grew better in some areas than others. I'd take my tiny shovel, dig around, and study the soil with all the seriousness of a future Nobel Prize-winning biologist. Or at least, that's how I saw it in my mind. I also had a strange obsession with figuring out why lazy people moved so slowly. Was there some science behind it? Did their muscles operate at a lower velocity? Of course, none of this made me the cool kid in school. But I didn't mind. Summer vacations to camp, getting lost in biology books, and obsessively asking questions about the natural world was enough for me. Until, of course, I left home for college, and the adventure called living on your own began. Moving into my dorm room felt like a rite of passage. It wasn't far from my parents', just the next town over, but it might as well have been a whole new planet. I was in charge of my own life now. No more mom knocking on the door at 7 a.m., no more dad's advice on what tools to bring to the garage. It was freedom, sweet and terrifying freedom. And with freedom came responsibilities. My dorm roommates were the best. We hit it off almost immediately, mostly because none of us had any idea how to be responsible adult. We wanted to hang out, party, and enjoy the college experience that all the older kids had promised us. The only problem? Money. Turns out that having fun, real fun, costs cash, and student loans only went so far. So, I took up a part-time job at a local bakery around the corner. It was small, cozy, and always smelled like fresh bread and pastries. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked it. I started in the kitchen, helping with the dough and sneaking bites of croissants when no one was looking. Eventually, they promoted me to cashier because, according to my boss, I had a face people trusted. I was also very good at suggesting that customers add just one more pastry to their order, which made the bakery a bit of extra cash. Things were going smoothly. My boss was a chill guy who always gave me extra bonuses, especially when I covered weekend shift. The bakery even threw impromptu staff parties that often ended with leftover cakes being shared like we were a family. Life was good. That was until he started showing up. There was this one customer, a regular. My colleagues started to notice him before I did. They'd point out how he always seemed to wait for me to take his order. "He's back," one of them would say, nudging me. "The guy who only wants you to take his order." At first, I laughed it off. Everyone has their favorite barista or cashier, right? I figured maybe I made good conversation or gave him a few extra stamps on his loyalty card. No big deal. But things started to get weird. This guy was older than me by at least 10 years. He was tall, really tall, and had this confident, almost intimidating presence. He'd stroll into the bakery, but the second he got to the counter and saw me, his entire demeanor would shift. He became shy, stuttering when he ordered, his voice trembling like a kid asking for a second piece of cake at dinner. And then I noticed something else. Whenever I wasn't working, he wouldn't stay. He'd walk in, scan the room, and if I wasn't there, he'd leave. No pastry, no coffee, just gone. One day, after an especially long shift, I saw him lurking near my dorm. At first, I thought I was imagining it. He was standing a little too far away to be there by coincidence, but when I went to approach him, he scurried off, quickly. Now, I wasn't just curious. I was a little freaked out. Who was this guy? Why did he care so much about me? And why was he near my dorm, looking like he wanted to say something but bolting whenever I got too close? Just when I thought my life couldn't get stranger, life threw me a curveball. It was the summer before my senior year when I started feeling unwell. At first, it was just fatigue. I thought it was stress from balancing college, work, and a semblance of a social life. But soon, I noticed bruises appearing on my body out of nowhere, and no matter how much sleep I got, I always felt exhausted. I went to the doctor, hoping it was just anemia or some minor issue. After a series of tests, they delivered the news that would change everything. I had a bone marrow disorder. A severe one. And I needed a transplant, soon. The news was crushing. My family wasn't rich, and while we had some insurance, the cost of the procedure and treatment wasn't something we could afford without getting in line for a donation. And that could take months, maybe years. But time wasn't something I had. My condition worsened quickly, and I knew that without a transplant, the outlook wasn't good. My world became a whirlwind of hospital visits, consultations, and waiting. Always waiting. And then, one day, when the situation seemed hopeless, the doctors told me they had found a match. A donor had come forward, and they were willing to donate immediately. It was a miracle. The surgery went off without a hitch. When I woke up in the hospital room, groggy and disoriented, the nurse by my side handed me a letter. "It's from your donor," she said, smiling softly. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope, unsure of what I'd find. Inside, there was a short, handwritten note. "Mark, I'm your brother. I left the family years ago, and never had the courage to come back. But I've been watching over you. I've wanted to get close again, but I was afraid you wouldn't accept me. I couldn't stay in the shadows when I found out about your illness. I hope this gift brings us together. Liam." My mind was spinning. A brother? I had no idea I had a brother. Growing up, my parents never mentioned anything about another child, another life that had drifted away from ours. And yet, it explained everything. The man in the bakery, the one who watched me from afar, the one who left when I wasn't there, that was Liam. I was flooded with emotions: confusion, anger, relief, sadness. Why hadn't he come forward sooner? Why was he afraid to tell me who he was? But more than anything, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had saved my life. After recovering from the surgery, I finally mustered up the courage to confront him. It wasn't hard to find him. He had been lingering around the hospital, waiting for the right moment to talk. When I approached him, he looked just as nervous as the day he came into the bakery. "You're my brother?" I asked, my voice shaking. He nodded, looking down at the ground. "I didn't know how to tell you. I left when you were a baby. I made a lot of mistakes, Mark. I wasn't ready to be part of the family, and by the time I realized what I'd lost, it felt like too much time had passed. Just when I thought I had pieced together the puzzle of my life, more twists began to unfold. I had always assumed my family was typical, no secrets, no hidden drama. But Liam's return unearthed things I never expected. One day, while going through some old family records, I discovered that my parents had known about Liam all along. My father had been estranged from his first son due to some legal issues, and my mother, well, she had kept it quiet for reasons I was still uncovering. But that wasn't the end of the surprises. Liam wasn't just working odd jobs here and there after he left home. He had become involved in, let's just say, some shady businesses to make ends meet. He'd reformed his ways, but his past was catching up with him, and now, some of his old associates were looking for him. As if my life hadn't been dramatic enough, now I had to worry about old gangsters coming after my newly discovered brother. Despite all the chaos, there were moments of humor and lightness. Liam, despite his shady past, had a quirky sense of humor. He would crack jokes about the absurdity of the situation, like how our family reunions would probably end up in a sitcom if things got any weirder. Max, my old dorm roommate, took to calling Liam the bakery stalker, which always made us laugh, even during the darkest days. Liam was also terrible at cooking, something I quickly discovered when he offered to help me in the kitchen one evening. We almost burned down my apartment trying to make spaghetti. It was ridiculous, but it was exactly what I needed, a reminder that despite everything, we were still just two brothers trying to make sense of a complicated life. In the end, I learned that life is full of unexpected twists, family secrets, and people trying to find their way back to the ones they love. Liam and I spent the next year rebuilding our relationship. He worked to prove that he had changed, not just to me but to himself. He got a legitimate job, and together, we started healing old wounds. My health improved, and life slowly returned to normal. I eventually graduated college, and I even got my dream job at a plant research facility. Turns out, my childhood obsession with biology paid off. Liam stayed in my life, not as a distant figure lurking in the shadows but as my brother, a part of my family. And while things weren't perfect, they were real. We were real. And that was enough.